on the notion of a golden age, why isn't the United States conditioning deeper cooperation with Budapest on Hungary reducing its extensive and ongoing deepening cooperation with China, which is a strategic rival for the United States? Secondly, if, despite President Trump's endorsement and your visit here, Prime Minister Orban does not succeed and loses the April election, does the U.S. commit to working with his challenger constructively? Prime Minister Orban, do you commit to accepting electoral defeat if it happens? And to both of you, Prime Minister Orban has said that the exemption that Hungary has been granted for Russian energy purchases is indefinite. The U.S. has said it was for 1 year. Which one is it? Thank you.
All right, well, let me start by answering that question. First of all, so everybody can be very clear. I've made this point repeatedly. I'll make it again. Under President Trump, it is our expectation that every nation on earth is going to act in their national interest. That's what nations are supposed to do. If the Prime Minister of Hungary does not act in the national interest of Hungary, he won't be Prime Minister for long. But who's going to act in the national interest of Hungary if their Prime Minister doesn't do it? If your government is not acting in your national interest, then who will? By the way, we feel the same way about America. So in those instances in which our national interest and some other countries' national interests are aligned, that is an opportunity for extraordinary partnership. And we have many, many areas where our national interests are aligned. Where they're not aligned or where we have some differences, that's where that alignment and the other issues, that's where this relationship, that's where these deep ties to one another are so important, because that's where you can find accommodation, that's where you can hear each other out, that's where maybe you can work together on. But we're not asking any country in the world to isolate themselves from anybody. We understand that every country in the world has to deal with the reality of their geography, of their economy, of their history, and of the challenges of their future. We will obviously share with partners and friends concerns we may have about certain things, but as an example, the United States, you mentioned China as an example, okay? We have trade and relations with China. The President of the United States is going to travel in April to China. Why? Because China's a big country. It's got 1 billion-something people, second largest economy in the world. They have nuclear weapons. It would be crazy. Okay, it's insane for the United States and China not to have relations and interact with one another. Now, two big countries like this, do we have differences? We absolutely do. And we'll have to manage those differences. And some of those differences are things we've spoken very frankly and clearly and repeatedly about the fact that it is not good for the world. It's not good for anybody to rely on one country or one economy for 90% of anything, especially things like critical supply chains. This is a reality. We want to diversify supply chains around the world. We've spoken clearly about it. That's not an anti-China thing. That's just the reality that over-dependence on one source is not good. And especially when there's been a willingness in the past to use it as leverage against each other. But we pursue these things within the context of the U.S. national interest. And that's why we met with the Chinese in South Korea earlier in the year, and we're able to reach an understanding on some trade matters. That was a mutual interest between us and them. So geopolitics is difficult because it requires a little bit of maturity and seriousness. Okay? It requires a little bit of seriousness about these things have real implications, and the balancing of relations between nation states requires maturity and seriousness. So our relationship here, you asked the last question about it. Look, I'm just telling you guys what it is. Okay? The president has an extraordinarily close relationship to the prime minister. He does, and it has had tangible benefits in our relationship. I'm not going to speculate about the future. You know, what happens in this country is up to the voters of this country to determine and decide, and we love the people of Hungary. But there's no reason to sugarcoat it. I'm going to be very blunt with you. The prime minister and the president have a very, very close personal relationship and working relationship.